All right, today we are diving deep into a really powerful idea from the philosopher Michael Sandel. It's an idea that honestly helps explain a huge paradox at the center of modern life, and we're pulling this all from his brilliant 1984 essay, The Procedural Republic and the Unencumbered Self.
Okay, so let's just start with the main question, because it's one I think we all feel, right? I mean, we live in a time with this incredible explosion of individual rights and freedoms, and yet there's this feeling, this widespread sense that we actually have less and less control over our own lives. How is that possible?
To really get to the bottom of this feeling, Sandel says we first have to wrap our heads around the paradox that's right at the heart of our politics today. And this, right here, this is the core tension. We have more legal rights, more entitlements than ever before, but our actual ability to shape our own destiny, as people and as a society, it feels like it's just slipping through our fingers. It's like the government is both more powerful than ever and, weirdly, totally powerless at the same time. This is the exact problem that Sandel wants to diagnose.
So what's the diagnosis? Well, Sandel argues that our whole form of government has changed in a really fundamental way. We've gone from one kind of country to another, and we now live in what he calls the procedural republic. So what on earth does that mean?
Well, this comparison just lays it out perfectly. We shifted from an older idea, the national republic, which saw itself as a formative community. Its job was to actively shape good citizens, to aim for common goals. But now we have the procedural republic, and its main job is totally different. It's not supposed to promote any particular version of the good life. It's just there to provide a neutral framework of rights and fair rules so that each one of us can go off and choose our own path.
And this procedural republic, it didn't just happen by accident. It's actually built on a very specific, very powerful philosophical idea, and that idea is this: the right is prior to the good.
This quote from Sandel's essay just nails it. The government is supposed to be a neutral referee, right? Not a coach telling us which goals we should be aiming for. A society is considered just because it's fair and neutral, not because of the moral quality of the lives that people choose to live within it.
Okay, so this is super important. This idea really has two parts to it. First, it means your individual rights are like trump cards. They can't just be sacrificed for what people call the general good. But second, and this is the really deep point, it means the actual rules of justice themselves can't be based on any single vision of what a good life is, whether that vision is religious or not.
Now, for a political philosophy this big to work, it has to have a very specific idea of who we are at its center. And this brings us to Sandel's most famous concept, the unencumbered self.
So let's just ask the question head on. If the whole point of justice is to be neutral about all the different ways a person could live their life, what does that assume about us? What kind of people are we? And here it is. The answer is the unencumbered self. This is a picture of you and me as individuals whose true identity is totally separate from our values, our goals, our relationships. It's the idea that there's a core me that exists before I choose all the things I might be or do in the world.
And this is the absolute key. For the unencumbered self, your real identity isn't about being a parent, or an American, or a Christian, or an artist. No, your core identity is your status as a free, choosing individual. The ability to choose is what makes you you, not the things you actually end up choosing.
This comparison just makes the whole thing so incredibly clear. On the left, you've got the modern ideal, the unencumbered self, the person who stands apart from everything, a pure subject of choice. And on the right, you have what Sandel calls the constitutive self. This is a person whose identity is actually made up of their community, their history, their family, all these attachments that aren't just things you pick and choose, but that actually make you who you are in the first place.
Okay, so we have the procedural republic. It's built on the idea of the right over the good, and that, in turn, needs this idea of the unencumbered self to work. But now, Sandel argues this entire vision has a deep, critical flaw. And to expose this flaw, Sandel turns to one of the biggest defenders of this whole worldview, the philosopher John Rawls. Rawls had this really powerful moral idea that in a just society, we all agree to share one another's fate. We set things up to help out the people who are worst off. And this right here is Sandel's devastating question. Why? Why should I share my fate with anyone else? If my true self is this free, independent, unencumbered being, what moral claim does my community actually have on me? Or on my stuff? We're basically just a bunch of strangers who happen to live near each other. And look at the words Sandel uses.
If you're an unencumbered self, things like paying taxes for social programs don't feel like you're part of a community. It feels like you're being used by a concatenated collectivity, which is just a fancy way of saying a random chain of individuals, for goals that you never personally agreed to. You see the flaw? The very idea of the unencumbered self sucks the moral life out of the community it's supposed to hold together.
And it all leads to this brilliant, unforgettable line. Our public life connects us in this huge, complicated web of rules and obligations. We are deeply entangled. But because our whole philosophy tells us that we are fundamentally separate, we feel no real connection, no deep loyalty to that web. We are less attached.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? How does this deep philosophy connect back to that feeling of powerlessness we started with?
Sandel basically leaves us with this challenge. If we want to figure out our political problems, that feeling of being crushed by the system yet totally unable to change it, we have to look in the mirror. We have to examine the theory of the person we've all been living by.
And that brings it all home to the big, provocative question we're left with. Who are we, really? Is our truest self the one that stands back and chooses everything from a distance? Or is who we are fundamentally shaped by our family, our community, our history, all the attachments that we don't choose but that make us who we are? The way we answer that might just decide what our politics look like in the future.
This entire explainer was based on Michael Sandel's incredible essay from 1984. If any of this sparked your interest, I really recommend you go look it up. Thanks for tuning in.